Welcome to part 3 of my Style 3D trouser construction tutorial. Well, it's not really a tutorial, you're just watching along. I will do a proper tutorial at one point, but as I mentioned in the first part of the video, they're changing the interface soon, so I don't want to do too much and then have to redo everything because all the buttons are in different places. In this part, I've scanned in parts of the interior of the pant, the pocket bags, and the waistband curtain. I use an Epson Perfection V600. It's recommended that you scan at least 600 dpi, although some companies I've talked to say they prefer up to 1200, which is pretty huge. But I guess, you give it more detail, you've got more to work with. So I've taken the scans into Style 3D's fabric module, which is another part of their solution, and it's a great tool for making tileable textures easily. In this case, see, I'm taking just sort of a small portion of the waistband and smoothing the color out a little bit. I don't want to do it too much. I still want some variation, and it can create a decent normal map, one of the features that Photoshop is taking away from us because they're trying to force us all to go into their 3D solution. But if you're working with Style 3D, this is a great tool, especially for plaids. I think I did a short tutorial on it earlier, but I will do a new one soon, showing my entire plaid workflow, not just creating the tileable texture, but how to set it up in the fabric layout in Style 3D so that you can drop pretty much any size of plaid in and it will constantly be matched up perfectly. You'll notice that I'm doing just the tape part and avoiding the little griplets. Those things above it are rubber griplets that's supposed to help your shirt stay in your pants. Because I'm going to use different normal map settings, I really want to create some extra dimension to it. And also because the tape is a satin, and so the reflective properties are different than the rubber. And even though I could create a fancy gloss map that would have just a portion of the tape shiny and the other matte, it's just easier for me anyway to create two different textures. It just means having very narrow pieces of ribbon inside my pant. But see here in the preview, I'm adjusting the gloss map to give it a little bit of shine. And I noticed that my normal map's off. So I had to play around with it a few times, and I realized that I had continued on a project. I was using a different scan, and it was taking the normal map settings from my previous scan. I didn't realize I had to break the link between the two. You see it's offset. So when I finally figured out, I just had to go and delete it and then start over again and create a new normal map. And then I got the result I was looking for. If you missed the last video where I comment about buttonholes and how they don't quite create the effect that I'm used to seeing, what I usually do is go and create some internal lines and sew them together right at the location of the buttonhole, and you'll see that it creates a bit more, see that pinch that you would expect to see. So in addition to the buttonhole, and I really like Style3D's buttonhole, this particular buttonhole much better than one in Clo. I still prefer sort of the realism of sewing the lines together. And sometimes I'll create a little cut and create a hole for the actual space between the edges of the buttonhole, but only if I'm not going to have a button sitting on top of it. Otherwise, it's just not worth the trouble. So here I'm going back to the scan of the waistband, and I'm going to go create my texture for my griplets. I wasn't super happy with the results of it just using a normal map. I didn't quite get the dimensionality I wanted, so I will almost certainly go and create a displacement map, which will help build in some of the realism. If the displacement map doesn't give me what I want, then I'll go so far as creating a tiny little OBJ the same way they do for stitches. But then you start to get pretty heavy file sizes. So I try to start with a normal map first, then go to displacement, and then to an OBJ. Once I finally got my pant to behave the way I wanted to and everything simulated the way I want, I went and I grabbed one of the sets. Um, Actually, they're called scenes or studios or something in Style 3D. It dropped it below the level of the floor for some reason, so I had to advance it, and then I would cut off his shoes a little bit, so I had to raise him up. But I like these backdrops and using these lights because it just gives some a little bit of shadow across the floor, and it looks a little bit more real. And then rather than having him just stand in the normal robot pose, I grab one of the poses that is included in Style 3D. And if you know anything about Mixamo or DAZ, there's some really great ways to import FBX poses for avatars and things in Style 3D, as well as animations, and that'll be the subject of an entirely different video. But be on the lookout for that because I really like the way that they handle simulation, not simulation, animation. Normally, at this part in the process, I will do a few snapshot renders. Unlike in some modeling software where if you're in the middle of a render and you stop it, you lose it. You can render a few passes and then hit when you're in the final render. Here I'm just in the preview, and then you can hit stop and it'll save the passes had done up until then. So you can experiment with some positions and viewpoints and have a look, do quick A/B comparisons, figure out what you like best before you go and run the final render. This is going to wrap up this Trouser production walkthrough. Once we get the new version of Style 3D, which will be coming out soon, I'll do a proper full tutorial. Until then, enjoy.